I'm Emily from Homemade Emily Jane. In this video, I'll show you how to make 4 at a time half square triangles. I'll show 2 different ways that I trim my half square triangles and go over how to calculate what size starting square you need for the 4 at a time half square triangle method. I personally prefer the 4 at a time half square triangle sewing method because it doesn't involve sewing on the bias. It does mean, however, that you have to be extra careful when pressing, but we'll go over that in a little bit. First off, let's talk about the process of making 4 at a time half square triangles. You'll begin by placing 2 squares right sides together and then sewing along all 4 edges using a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. I personally prefer to sew off the edge of the fabric and then stop in the needle down position when I get to the corner, rotate it, and start sewing from the edge of the fabric again. Once you've sewn along all 4 edges, your square will look like this. Next, you'll use a ruler and a rotary cutter to cut diagonally across both diagonal lines of the square, like shown. When you pull them apart, you now have 4 half square triangles. Next, you'll need to decide if you're going to be trimming before or after pressing. I like to trim mine before pressing using a specific ruler, which I'll show you about first. The rulers that I've been using lately are called the Clearly Perfect Slotted Trimmers made by New Leaf Stitches. As you can see, this trimmer cuts half square triangles at the 1/2 inch. The one I'm doing right now is a 3.5 inch half square triangle. You line up the dotted line with your stitches and the solid line with the edge of your fabric. You'll use your rotary cutter to trim the dog ears and along the sides of the half square triangle like shown. Once you've trimmed your dog ears and both sides, you can open up your piece to see your perfectly trimmed half square triangle quilt block. Since I like to change sew, I made them all in one batch. Here's how they look once they're all trimmed. And of course, I have to show you the trimmings. When pressing your half square triangles, you want to be careful not to distort them. I like to set the seam first, and then gently open it up and finger press towards the dark side, and then move the iron along at a diagonal in the direction of the seam. If you would like to use a square ruler to trim your half square triangles, you'll press them before trimming. To trim a half square triangle with a square ruler, make sure it has a diagonal line. Line up the diagonal with the seam of your half square triangle and the corner of your half square triangle with the correct dot on the ruler. These ones are 4.5 inches. Next, with your rotary cutter, trim the side and the top of your half square triangle. Next, you rotate your half square triangle completely and line up your diagonal line like you did before, as well as the corner edges. Once it's all lined up, use your rotary cutter to trim the side and the top again. So you might be wondering how to determine what size starting square to use for a particular size half square triangle. If you're following a pattern, it'll likely tell you exactly how to do it, but if not, this calculation can come in particularly helpful. To figure out what size starting square you'll need, take your unfinished block size for the half square triangle that you're trying to make and divide that number by 0.64 inches. The number that you get will be the minimum starting square size. I like to round up to the nearest 1/4 inch so that I have a little bit of excess to trim off. Here are some examples for you to use, and it shows the correlation between the unfinished block size and the starting square size. Feel free to save the sheet for future reference. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed learning about the 4 at a time half square triangle method. I feature this method in my upcoming quilt pattern called Triangular. I hope you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel And check out my website, homemadeemilyjane.com, for lots more quilting tips and tricks.